Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new video. 2 hours of horror stories. I hope you all enjoy them. The first 45 minutes are all stories that happened on the job, and the rest of the video is just a bunch of other horror stories that I thought were really good. It's extremely difficult to try and fill out a 2-hour time slot with on-theme horror stories, but I think this is one of the better lineups we've had in a while. I get comments all the time from people asking how they can help out the channel, how they can help grow the channel, and honestly, the only thing that I ask for is that if you do enjoy this video at any point and you feel that it is deserving of one, please be sure to drop a like rating. It helps out so much. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated if you'd like to see my future content. But yeah, sit back, grab a coffee, whatever it is that you do to relax. Enjoy the video, tell someone you love them, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. I signed up as a DoorDash driver about 8 months ago. Not much income, even compared to my crappy day job, but it helps pay child support and keeps the pantry stocked with Sprite and Cheez-Its for when my son Andy stays with me on the weekends. I never thought there was anything special about Maple Green Road until about a week ago. At least, I think it was a week ago. It's been hard to keep track. Before this DoorDash order, I thought the street was nothing but your standard, outdated, 90s neighborhood, featuring houses with overgrown shrubs and trees decorated with tire swings and faded birdhouses. But the house belonging to the Johnsons, according to their DoorDash account, felt wrong as soon as I drove up. It was just a red brick, 2-story, cookie-cutter building like the rest of the street, with a lawn that needed to be mowed. But somehow, I didn't think I'd noticed this particular house before. Something about the architecture made the front windows look like a row of watching eyes. The porch just a couple of steps leading to a stoop, like a snarl. Looking back now, I should have driven away, but the delivery instructions had mentioned there would be a $20 tip, which was astronomical as far as DoorDash goes. I put my car in park by the curb, took my phone off its dashboard mount, and grabbed the oversized paper bag of Wendy's food from my passenger seat. As I stepped up onto the sidewalk, I hit the "I've arrived at customer" button on my Dasher app. I set foot on the path leading to their front door, blinked, and found myself no longer on the path. Instead, I stood on the other side of the road, and I mean all the way across the road. I saw my car, flashers on, parked in front of the red brick home, and I was 10 yards away from it. I'd like to think that I'm a pretty level-headed guy who isn't prone to exaggeration, but the feeling of wrongness intensified. On the peak of the roof, a weather vane shaped like a raven started to spin, flashing in the early evening sunlight. I didn't feel any wind that could have moved it. Somehow, even then, I thought I had just imagined it. I thought I must have gotten turned around getting out of the car. I shrugged off the weird feeling. It had been a long day at work. That was definitely it, I told myself. I must have gotten distracted and went the wrong way. Comforted, stupidly, by my own rationalization, I walked back across the street and up the path. When I was halfway across the yard, a kid's face emerged in a window on the right side of the house. It was a teenage boy wearing a baseball cap. I could see his face fairly clearly for how dark it was inside the house. He was looking at my car. His eyes narrowed in what seemed to be confusion. But when he saw me coming up over the curb again, his expression gave way to excitement. Or maybe it was relief. He must have been pretty hungry. He waved in greeting, but before I could wave back, he looked over his shoulder and stepped away from the window. I stepped up onto the porch, frowning, and my phone buzzed in my hand. A DoorDash notification popped up on the screen. The Johnsons. The door is unlocked. Leave the food on the table. Thanks. I looked up at the front door. It had a window in the center, granting me a view into the house. Straight ahead I could see a dining room with a large table at its center, framed by another large window at the back of the house. All the lights inside were off. The weird feeling I'd tried to push away came rushing back. Everything about this situation seemed very wrong. Huge tip or not, there was no chance I was going inside that house. I set the food down and opened my Dasher app. Sorry, I typed. DoorDash policy says I can't go inside a private home to deliver orders. You'll have to grab it from the porch. I wasn't even sure if that was true, but I didn't wait for a reply. I turned away from the door and headed down the steps, tapping the complete delivery button as I went. I was distracted enough that I walked right into something. The door. I walked into the front door of the house. I had been heading towards my car one moment, and the next, I hit my forehead against the glass window set in the front door. My throat felt tight as I stepped back. The house seemed to crouch over me. The stoop suddenly claustrophobic like the mouth of a cave. My phone lit up with another message. We can't open the door from inside. Put the food on the table. Leave the door open when you come in. I didn't bother to reply. I turned away again, refusing to stay here any longer. My foot almost reached the first stair, but landed on the stoop instead. The door only inches from my face once again. What is this? I breathed, my heart pounding so hard I could feel my veins pulsing in my neck. 4 more messages came in then, one right after the next in a staccato series of buzzes. You can't leave unless you put it on the table. Now that you're here, it won't let you leave. Please, please leave the door open. My insides turned to ice as I read. It wouldn't leave me alone. What the hell was it? I had no idea what was going on here, and all I wanted was to get away from this house. I looked over my shoulder at my car, the flasher still blinking where I'd left it, and somehow knew I wouldn't be able to reach it, not unless I followed the instructions, and left the stupid food on the table. I wish I'd tried anyway. Even if I was stuck in an endless loop of trying to get to my car, it still would have been better than sealing my fate by setting foot inside the house. No point wishing for that now, though. I picked up the Wendy's bag from the porch, turned the doorknob, and stepped inside. The house was quiet and dim, the only light coming from the windows shaded by trees outside. I found myself in a central hall that stretched forward to the dining room table. There wasn't much other furniture to be seen, just a grandfather clock that looked like it was malfunctioned in the 80s. The table didn't even have chairs. Over my head, a 2-story alcove housed a simple chandelier, its metal frame glinting in the sunlight from a window near the high ceiling. I was scared. Looking back, I know that I was right to be scared, but I was still nowhere near as scared as I should have been. Was this some kind of haunting? Some kind of delayed acid trip? I had no explanation for my situation, despite my racing thoughts. Whatever it was, I just needed to put the damn Wendy's bag on the table. I left the door half open and made my way deeper into the house, my sneakers squeaking on the tile floor. The table was framed by that window at the back of the dining room, making it seem like it was highlighted into a video game. Here's your objective. Reach it and move on. The entryway seemed to be stretching longer as I walked. Surely the people who'd been sending messages were around here somewhere. The window where I'd seen the teenage boy had been on the right side of the house, but for now everything was silent. Halfway to the dining room, another darker hall led off to my right. It seemed like it might lead to bedrooms or offices, but I couldn't see anything more than smooth walls and shadows. I couldn't even make it outdoors. I had almost reached the table when a scent caught my attention. I hadn't noticed it when I first came in, but it was a little sweet, a little metallic, and a lot like... Something wet dripped against my leg. It slid from below the hem of my shorts along my calf. In the dim light, the wet streak of my leg was a red so dark it almost looked black. It was coming from the Wendy's bag. Blood, sticky and wet, and soaking the bottom of the paper bag. I knew there was normal food in there. I'd smelled it during the entire drive from Wendy's. The stuff dripping was probably a busted ketchup packet, or some burger grease, or, deep in the house, a door closed. My breath hitched in my throat. I ran the rest of the way to the table and tossed the bag onto it. It puddled onto the cherry wood surface, the bottom thoroughly soaked. The light coming through the big dining room window was getting darker. Were those stars in the sky outside? Hadn't it only been 5:30? It was July. It shouldn't have been getting dark yet. It didn't matter. I was leaving. I stepped back from the table but couldn't pull my eyes away from the paper bag. The blood had spread, masking Wendy's grinning face in a film of red. For the last time, my phone buzzed with a burst of messages. Leave. Run right now. And leave the door open. Leave. I shoved my phone in my pocket and ran. The front door was still half open, giving me a clear path to my car where it sat, flashing its blinkers by the curb. The paper bag crunched on the table a dozen steps behind me, and at the same time something else darted out from the hallway to my left. I yelped, but it was the kid I'd seen in the window, wearing his baseball cap. He grabbed my hand and pulled me towards the half-open door. "Run," he said, his voice hoarse, as if he hadn't used it in months. "Well, it eats the food. We have to go before..." Something plopped onto the floor in front of us. The Wendy's bag, torn, soaked with blood. The kid ground to a halt, and I nearly barreled over him in my attempt to stop. He was looking up. I followed his gaze. In the dim light of the alcove above, where the window was now darkened and the chandelier barely visible, something was looking down at us. Something with a confusing mix of shapes, slick curves like the frames of chairs forming ribs, the bloated swell of overstuffed couch cushions forming lumpy sides, the glinting points of a dozen kitchen knives and silver forks forming jagged teeth, and bones, human bones, sticking out at odd angles. The kid had time to make a brief, strangled groan. That was it. And then the thing overhead moved in a flick of motion. A tendril made of twisted bed sheets snapped towards us and hooked the kid around the throat. He screamed as it yanked him up, and as I stumbled back, knives thunked into flesh. His scream stopped. The entire house creaked. Somehow it sounded pleased. The thing began squelching and crunching over my head. Eating. I darted for the door, but as I reached for the handle to pull it the rest of the way open, it slammed itself shut. The grandfather clock on the wall clanged once. Somewhere deeper in the house I heard doors opening and slamming shut. The house was laughing at me. I grabbed the handle and tried to turn, but it wouldn't budge. It wasn't even locked. I could see that the deadbolt was open, but the handle was just fixed in place. I was trapped. Overhead, the creature made a sound like chairs scraping across the floor. I made the mistake of looking up at it. The thing's legs uncurled from the chandelier, made of wire hangers that seemed too flimsy to support its bulk. It stabbed its feet into the drywall and lunged towards me. I dove. Sheets brushed against the back of my calves, warm and wet and sticky. I scrambled into the dark hallway and sprinted as fast as my legs would carry me. The hallway seemed to stretch for dozens of yards, more distance than should have fit into the home that I'd seen from outside. My lungs burned, my breath rasping through my throat, but I ran until I crashed headlong into a door. I breathed a prayer of thanks as it opened, then slammed the door shut behind me. I looked around for furniture I could shove against it, but I was in a small bathroom, and nothing was here except the toilet and vanity anchored to the wall. In the space next to the toilet, a window looked out to a darkened street. I could see my car parked by the curb. Its flashers would keep going until its battery died, and it would sit there until some neighbor called a tow truck and had it pulled away. I think it's been a week since I got here. I'm not sure why that creature can't seem to reach me in this bathroom, but I've hardly attempted to leave. The bathroom window won't open or break, and the only time I managed to reach the front door, the knob still didn't budge. I barely made it back to the bathroom alive, so I'm hoping this post will make it out and catch someone's attention. My phone doesn't seem to be working right, and no one who's walked by the house has even seemed to notice that it's here. I think that's why they towed my car. My phone is nearly dead. But if you see this post, the address is... I won't use you as bait. Not like the Johnsons tried to do with me. Just please, when you get to the porch, if you can get to the porch, leave the door open. I'm not a huge fan of my current job. A little over a year into the pandemic, I found myself laid off like many others. I didn't love my job at the time, but it paid relatively well, and that pay had allowed me to move out on my own. My degree and experience are all in IT, and while I never had trouble finding work before, finding a comparable position to my last one has proven much harder than I initially hoped. After 6 months of fruitless job hunting, and watching my savings account dwindle away, I decided to take a job at the local grocery store just to have enough income to keep myself afloat. And when I say the local grocery store, I really mean it. It's the only one in town, and it's the largest building in the area by a fair margin. Retail work isn't new to me. I worked in a grocery store all throughout college. That said, I certainly wasn't looking forward to returning to it. I don't like dealing with rude customers all day, and retail middle managers aren't much better in my experience. Luckily, I was hired on for overnight help in the produce department, which meant I normally don't have to deal with customers, and I really only see my boss a couple times a week. To be honest, I barely managed to pay all my bills, and I don't have anything left to put into savings. But I'm making it work. It's far from ideal, but I guess things could be worse. Well, at least that's what I thought up until a few weeks ago. It was a Wednesday night, and I remember it being unusually cold. My shift starts at 9:30 p.m. after the store closes, and I get off at 6 a.m. before we open. I was expecting a pretty uneventful night since we don't get a fresh food delivery on Wednesdays. I clocked in, put in my earbuds, picked out a podcast, and went to work restocking the sales floor. Some people think that being in a dimly lit grocery store after hours is creepy, like one of those liminal spaces. But honestly, I just find it relaxing. There are only a handful of other people working in the store, and none of them in my area, so I pretty much get to do my own thing 99% of the time. A couple hours into my shift, just as I was about to take my 15-minute break, a call came through on the walkie-talkie clipped to my belt. "Hey, produce department, food truck just got here." Food truck? That was odd. There shouldn't be one tonight. I glanced over the printed order guide on the nearby counter to confirm that nothing was scheduled to be delivered. After a few moments, Jim, the warehouse attendant, called for me on the radio again. I decided to head over and see for myself. As I came into the back room, I could hear Jim arguing with another unknown voice back near the truck docks. I rounded the corner and saw him sitting at his desk frowning at a clipboard while a delivery truck driver stood next to him shaking his head. Jim was a stout, middle-aged man, with dark gray hair and a near constant look of jaded apathy on his face. Tonight, that familiar expression seemed to be tinged with a bit of annoyed frustration as well. It didn't take long to realize that he was just as confused as I was as to why we were getting a delivery. "I'm sorry, man, but I don't think this is our truck." Jim looked up at the trucker sympathetically and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I don't have any record for a delivery tonight, and this shipping manifest doesn't even match up with our location. It's gotta be you guys." The elderly trucker protested. "I've been making deliveries for over 30 years, and I know what—" The trucker trailed off into a long-winded argument based more on his supposed experience than any actual proof or reasoning as to why the shipment was ours. While that was playing out, I went over to the rear of the trailer, which was already backed up to our dock. I immediately noticed something strange. Our usual delivery trailers were covered in peeling decals, advertising our stores alongside all the required safety verbiage. This trailer looked pristine, like it had just rolled off the assembly line. You could almost see yourself in the shiny, white painted metal. Beyond that, the outside was almost entirely free of any decals, signs, or lettering. The only feature at all was in the middle of the roll-up door, just above eye level, the word "Caution" displayed in large black letters. I heard the argument start to wind down behind me. It sounded like we were going to have to unload the product anyways and store it in our coolers, at least until they could talk to our supplier in the morning. Hearing this, I went ahead and reached for the handle to open it up. After lifting it just a few inches, suddenly the door flew open with incredible force, as if a huge motor had just kicked into gear. The shrill squeal of metal deafened me, and I instantly felt myself get lifted a few inches off the ground before I let go and fell abruptly onto my stomach. A harsh blast of refrigerated air hit me as it pushed its way out of the trailer and onto the loading dock. I heard Jim and the trucker abruptly stop, bickering, and begin rushing towards me. I sheltered my face from the icy wind as they both helped me to my feet. As I dusted the front of my apron off and repeatedly assured them that I was okay, I naturally turned my attention back towards the open trailer. All three of us standing on the dock seemed to stop and stare almost in unison at the puzzling sight now revealed to us. It was empty. Not a single box, crate, or pallet. Nothing but cold, dark metal and wisps of chilled fog wafting along the barren floor. "What the hell?" the trucker softly mused. Jim glanced back down at his clipboard and started flipping the top page back and forth in his fingers, clearly looking for an answer that none of us had. As I stared into the dark void of the trailer, I felt oddly uncomfortable, like something was just wrong. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I started to feel faint. My fight or flight instincts kicked in. I moved briskly back to the trailer door, grabbed the looped strap handle hanging down, and pulled the door closed in one decisive motion. As soon as I heard the metal slats hit the deck, I flipped the latch and made sure it was secure with a firm stomp of my boots. Jim and the trucker went back to arguing, though this time they seemed more intent on figuring out how an empty, unmarked, and unscheduled truck had made it all the way out to us. I stayed for a bit to listen, but decided to excuse myself after a few minutes when it was clear there was nothing to be gained from the discussion. I still felt odd, and all I wanted was to get back to work. I went back to the produce section and started filling the apple table. As I piled bags of Honeycrisp and Fuji apples onto the table, I kept reflexively looking around every few minutes at the empty department. I know it sounds cliche, but I felt like I was being watched, like every move I made was being silently judged and evaluated. I tried to shake it off and just focus on my podcast, but it was hopeless. After emptying everything off my work cart, the table was about 3/4 of the way full. I remember I still hadn't taken my break, so I decided to go sit down for a bit and clear my thoughts. My 15-minute break lasted closer to 30, another perk of working mostly by myself. As I walked back from the break room, the uneasy feeling returned. I silently cursed at myself for getting so worked up over something so little. Sure, the trailer incident was odd, but there was nothing overtly sinister about a warehouse logistical error. I had almost talked myself back into an uneasy sense of calmness when I reached the apple table, and my stomach dropped once more. It was completely full, almost overflowing. The spots I hadn't touched yet had been filled out, and the spots I had already hit were stacked even higher. I stared dumbfounded at the table for at least a few minutes. I tried to convince myself that there wasn't anything off, that I had actually finished filling the table before my break and just forgotten. It was enough to lower my heart rate just a bit, but I don't think I ever really believed it. The next few shifts were filled with similar occurrences. Tables being filled when I was sure I still had more to go. Going to empty the trash at the end of my shift, only to find that the bin was already empty. Grabbing a mop to clean up a spill, only to find the area spotless once again by the time I returned. Every time I had a new excuse to tell myself. I was just being forgetful. I wasn't getting enough sleep. Someone else must have come over to help out. After almost a week of these strange happenings, I stopped making excuses. I stopped trying to explain it. I found myself in a weird mental space that you might call acceptance. I started consciously working less each shift, and the work still got done. My boss even commended me on how good the department had been looking when he got in the morning. One night I didn't even leave the break room. I just sat there watching reruns of the Andy Griffith Show on the ancient flickering TV until my shift was almost over. I walked out to the department just before I left, and sure enough, everything was done. The tables were full, the floors were clean, even the work log was filled out. As I'm writing this, I haven't actually been to work in over a week. I've just been laying around my house. Suddenly I find it hard to do anything beyond the bare minimum to keep myself functioning. An intense blanket of lethargy weighs on me every moment I'm awake. Even while I'm eating or walking to the bathroom, I feel like I could fall back asleep at any moment. And through all of this, no one at work has called me. I check my hours online, and I'm clocking in and out on time every day. Or someone is, at least. The only communication I've gotten in days was from one of my friends that lives in town. He texted me a few hours ago asking if everything was okay. He had gone to get some groceries early this morning, and had seen me as I was walking out. He waved and called out to me, but got no response. Apparently I just stared at him blankly, and then went back to walking. He saw me. The other me. And now he's here. Or I'm here, I guess. I can see myself through my bedroom window, standing in my front yard looking back at me. I feel much weaker now than I did this morning. Even weaker than I felt just a few minutes ago when I started writing this. It takes all of my energy and focus just to keep typing. I don't know what he wants, but every time I look away from my computer screen, he seems to be just a bit closer. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I feel like I'm the one in the yard, and I see myself at my desk, hunched over and shivering. It feels like my own thoughts are slipping away from me. I don't know why. But I think the next time I close my eyes, I won't open them again. Updates. I feel better now. No need to worry. I just need to get some rest before work. Alright, I'm not even sure how I should start this, but here we go. I work at a 24-hour gas station. Honestly, I'm not even sure why we're open all the time. The gas station sits right off a hardly busy road. The only average visitors are truckers, locals in need of milk at midnight for some reason, and people visiting that lose their way or have car troubles. I know, I shouldn't be the one complaining about people who have to ask for help in a creepy gas station, but after a while it just becomes troublesome. Somehow everyone loses their way on that road, and somehow they always seem to run out of gas just in time to darken my doorstep. If you haven't guessed by now, I work the night shift, which means I get to deal with all of the creatures that go bump in the night. When I first started working, strange things only happened every now and then. Someone would walk in completely drenched from head to toe, but talking and acting like nothing was wrong. The first few times I pointed it out, even asked them if they needed help or a place to warm up, but that was a mistake. They would just stare blankly at me, almost like a character on a TV show when the camera leaves the room. After making eye contact with me, they would continue as if nothing happened, like I never said anything. Eventually I realized that it's pointless to try and address any strangeness that occurs at night in a small building. It became more of an inconvenience than anything. I'd ask them what was going on, they'd stare at me lifelessly, then we'd continue on. After a few weeks I got really good at not caring what came into the station. Honestly, it was more shocking when someone acting perfectly normal came in. The longer I spent working there, the less said people occurred. Suddenly my nights were filled with stranger and stranger people. Someone doused in kerosene coming in to buy a pack of Marlboro Lights. A person missing half their arm whose blood miraculously disappeared upon their leaving. Hell, sometimes the things that entered didn't even seem human. They look perfectly normal, but with small imperfections, almost as though they were piecing together how to look human but couldn't quite get it right. Thumbs facing the wrong way, the whites of their eyes a greenish hue instead of white, too many or far too few teeth, same thing with fingers. Despite their unnerving and uncanny appearance, they behaved just like the others, acting as though everything was the most average thing in the world. It was just longer after that when things started to take a toll on me. Suddenly the things, or people, if you could call them that, seemed violent. Not towards me, of course. Weirdly enough, it seemed like nothing that entered ever even disliked me. They actually seemed to be friendly. It was when the more humanish ones started coming covered in blood, buying only a pack of gum and leaving, that I became nervous. At some points, I couldn't even recognize if they were a human or something else, but that scared me more than anything. Recently, the things visiting the shop have hardly even been human-looking. Creatures with no faces will enter and just stare at the drinks, then leave without a word. Shadows void of any features will stop by and wait for another customer to enter before following them out. Sometimes I could swear I saw honest-to-God ghosts, or ghouls, or whatever the hell you want to call them. Disfigured and thin monsters would scamper in on all fours, just patiently sitting at the register until I offered them something even as small as a stick of gum. The worst of it was last night, and it's shaken me so much that I'm considering calling in sick for the rest of the week. After my usual cycle of various creatures making their rounds, something changed. Everything seemed dimmer, colder. The air was thick with the smell of rain and wind. Then it entered. So tall it almost had to crouch inside the building. shadowy and ashen. It spoke to me unlike all the others. It was real. It was pretending everything is normal. It knew me, and it knew I knew it. I was considering fleeing. This presence wasn't as common to me, and I felt completely out of control of whatever was happening. It must have noticed because it opened its mouth, inky black tar in the shape of teeth dripping down. There is lots to come, but you will be safe. Worry not about what happens outside. We care for you. As it started to leave, crouching down to fit through the door, its raspy voice echoed back, "Count the crows, open your doors to us, and do not follow us out of them." What do I even do? Ever since that night, I've been having such vivid nightmares. When I fall asleep, I'm suddenly back at work, yet I wake up in my bed. Everywhere I go, I see crows. Am I just noticing them more now? Are they hurting people? Do I have a moral obligation to step in? Could I just sit back while these creatures terrorize others? While I just sit in the safety of the gas station? Do I go back to work? I've never even met the owners. I have no one to ask or talk to about this. I'm a detective, and yes, I know this should not be what I'm doing, but I need to get this off my chest. I've worked for years and I've experienced something unlike anything you'll ever have heard before. It still makes no sense. Years ago, a friend of mine who also worked at the police station informed me of a case. Name, Emily Rhodes. A 32-year-old woman had gone missing in her home in the southeast side of the town. Missing people cases were rare for me in town, but not entirely uncustomary. My colleague, however, stated that the woman's husband wasn't making any sense with his statement. Me being me, I decided to go see this man for more clarity on the event, even though it wasn't my case. I approached the door of the man's house and knocked firmly. What greeted me was a slow, uneasy opening of the door and a middle-aged man who looked like he hadn't showered in weeks appearing. I told the man that I had heard about the disappearance of his wife and wanted to ask a few simple questions. He took me into his living room, and as soon as I stepped in the room I noticed something strange. There was a mannequin of a blonde woman with glasses sitting on his couch. I tried my best to ignore it, and sat on the single-seated couch adjacent to the mannequin. I didn't want to be rude and ask, but the man didn't seem to act like anything was unnatural. The man made us both a cup of coffee, and came and sat right next to the mannequin. "So, when did your wife go missing?" I queried. "It happened 3 days ago. I tried to look for her myself, and I couldn't find her anywhere. On the morning she went missing, I came downstairs and I saw this mannequin here. It just looks like her. I don't understand what's happening. Where's my wife? How did this get here?" I looked into the eyes of the mannequin, and something felt really off about it. For something that was mostly just plastic, it looked extremely human-like. I felt very confused about the situation initially. My rational mind then started to click. In an attempt to make sense of the encounter, I assumed the man was crazy. The mannequin was perhaps some sort of coping mechanism after losing his wife who left him. I explained to him we would try everything in our power to find his wife, and that we would try to follow any leads that came our way. Shortly after leaving the man's house, and his creepy mannequin, we did all the regular searches in the local area to find his wife. Sadly, we found nothing. Not a single trace. A few days pass and another case falls on my lap. Name, Kevin Sanders. In this instance, a 14-year-old boy is reported missing. I thought this was just another missing person case until I read more about the details of the report. It stated that on the morning of his disappearance, his mother tried to wake him up for school. She entered his room and repeatedly said his name. No answer. She could visibly see a lump in the covers, so she knew her son was there. When she went over and pulled the covers off her son, She found that a mannequin that looked just like her son was laying in a sleeping position on his bed. Again, we did all the standard searches, and we could not find the 14-year-old boy. The only thing left was the mannequin that appeared in his home. No explanation of how it got there. I checked everything. If there was a break-in, if the mother had spare keys someone might have found. Nothing. Naturally, we took the mannequins in for evidence. We had 2 of them in our collection now. The most disturbing thing about these mannequins were just how much they looked like the missing person they'd replaced. They were practically a one-for-one look-alike. The most notable difference was that lights reflected off the plastic distinctly differently the way it does to human skin. It made all of us at the station feel incredibly uneasy. We were now definitely aware that something stranger was going on. 2 people gone, and 2 mannequins that looked like them appearing in a relatively similar part of town. Obviously not a coincidence. A week later, and we couldn't fathom what was happening. What started as a few of these cases had grown into a large number very quickly. I trembled as I flipped through a sizable pile of files that ended up on my desk on Monday morning. Name: Beth Higgins. 72-year-old woman reported missing by her family. A day later, a mannequin that looks just like her was found sat on a bench of the local park she used to visit frequently. Name: Jude Lowry. 41-year-old man reported missing by his brother. Later on this same day, it's found that there is a mannequin that looks like the man located underneath the truck in the garage. This man was a mechanic, and was apparently in the process of repairing his brother's truck, which had broken down recently. Name: Josh Sauter. 6-month-old baby missing. A mannequin of a baby is found in the crib by the infant's parents. After a 3-week period, we found that 9 people in the same town had disappeared and were replaced by a mannequin version of themselves. We were dealing with a kidnapper, a serial kidnapper who was clearly messed up in the head, creating mannequins of people's loved ones to give to their families after abducting them. Seriously, what is going on? We tried so hard to find anything about these disappearances, and we found nothing. Not a single lead. It was genuinely just like 11 people were replaced in an instant by a mannequin version of themselves. Now, here's where this gets really bizarre. You see, where I'm from, we can only hold evidence for 6 months after the time of an offense. In that time period, we found nothing of importance regarding the mannequins. No fingerprints, no loose hairs on them. Nothing ultimately useful to us. Therefore, they had to be returned to the place we'd found them. The dozens of mannequins that had collected up dust in our evidence room therefore had to be given back to their owners. Do you have any idea how messed up it is to return a mannequin of someone's loved one after several months when you are supposed to be the one helping to return their real loved one? We had to return dozens of mannequins to the people who found them. They reacted to this, as you'd expect, with a lot of sadness, anger, puzzlement. We didn't really know what they'd do with the mannequins, but we expected that most of them, if not all of them, would simply get rid of them. A month after returning the mannequins to the victims' loved ones, I received a call from an unknown number. It turned out to be the man from the first case whose wife was still missing. He sounded rather panicked and was mumbling every other word conveyed. He told me that he put the mannequin in the attic, as he understandably couldn't stand the sight of it. On one night, he went into his kitchen before he was about to sleep to get a glass of water. He entered the gloomy room and promptly turned on the lights. When he looked across the kitchen, he jumped backwards and fell to the floor. The man said that the mannequin of his wife, the mannequin that he put in the attic, was standing over the kitchen sink. It just stood there utterly lifeless, however its arms had changed position, and it somehow had a cloth in its hands. It looked like the plastic humanoid figure was about to clean some dishes. Stupidly, I downplayed this at the time because I thought this man was just insane. When I visited him, everything about his mannerisms told me this was the case. A day after, I get another call. This time is from the mother of the 14-year-old boy who informed me she did something similar with her mannequin. It was put away in the garage with the intention of destroying it, as it reminded her of her missing son, which made her extremely depressed. Over time, she'd forgotten that she'd even received the mannequin again, as she almost never went into her garage for anything. She came home one evening and opened the door to her lonely house. The mother screamed as she was greeted by the mannequin of her son standing right behind the front door. Again, the mannequin had seemingly changed its figure. The mother said that when she opened the door, the mannequin of her son was stood in the open hallway pointing directly at the door, directly at her. She looked into its eyes and said that she felt a level of fear she'd never experienced before. When I interviewed her after, she said it was as though the spirit of her son was shaming her for letting him get abducted at such a young age. When we checked her home, the mannequin was indeed in the position she claimed it was. All of a sudden, it was like these pieces of plastic had minds of their own. Multiple people from previous cases said that the mannequins of their loved ones were moving on their own accord. In the police station, we now believe that the kidnapper, after many months of inactivity, had returned to yet again mess with the loved ones of the victims. This was a trend in the actions of this deranged psychopath. One of the people said to us that they were in the kitchen making a late evening meal. Halfway through making some chicken teriyaki, they glanced over at the open door to the living room. To their horror, they saw the tilted head of the mannequin of their own sister peering around the doorway. The only thing they could see was the head of the mannequin leaning around whilst the rest of the body was concealed. It was like the mannequin was menacingly watching her sister cook this meal. This made her scream and run out the back door before she told us about this. The last call of the week was perhaps the most dangerous and unsettling of all the stories we'd heard about the mannequins. Remember the brother of the mechanic I mentioned earlier? He too found that the mannequin of his brother was moving around their home when he wasn't looking. It scared him so much that he took the mannequin outside and tried to burn it. Burning plastic isn't exactly effective, however he was able to completely disfigure the mannequin and left its tatters in the garden. During the night, the man awoke in his bedroom and felt something poking against his chest. He reached over to his bedside light and turned it on with the flick of a switch. The man yelled and frantically pushed as he ran out of his house with only his pants on. The man claimed that when he turned on the light, he saw the mannequin of his brother standing over him in his sleep. The mannequin that was previously left in tatters was somehow completely repaired. It had a knife going through its hand, and it was holding it against the man's chest. The scariest thing was the reported facial expression of the mannequin. You see, the mannequins all had a tone-deaf expression, as you'd expect. When the man turned on the light, he said that the mannequin had lowered its head and looked directly into his eyes with the knife on his chest. It didn't have a tone-deaf expression. Instead, it displayed an emotion of anger. This man saw the plastic face of his own brother looking down on him, as though he despised him more than anything else in the world, almost like it hated the fact that the brother tried to burn the mannequin and wanted revenge. We knew that we needed to take the mannequins back into evidence as soon as possible. The cases were officially being reopened. Before we could do this, all of the mannequins on what appeared to be the exact same day had disappeared. They were never seen again. We had just set up a variety plans to catch the kidnapper too. This included newly set up CCTV footage to capture who this person was. The disappearance of the mannequins, however, meant that the kidnapper also went back into hiding. To this day, I'm left with night terrors about these cases. You have no idea how much it hurts to see these people so upset and you essentially can't do anything. I'll never be able to shake this feeling off for the rest of my life. The people who disappeared before the arrival of the mannequins have been missing for years. God bless their souls, wherever they are. Last week, my friend Alex started to exhibit symptoms of, well, let's call it an unusual skin condition. On Monday, during our econ lecture, he complained about small bumps and blisters forming on his back. I brushed it off and reminded him that changing one's bed sheets every 6 months, along with an irregular hygiene schedule, the man smelled like he needed a shower then and there, could do that to a college frat boy. Ignoring my stab, as if he'd barely recognized it, his attention focused on something else entirely. He said the bumps felt and looked a bit like chicken pox. Have you had chicken pox? I asked him, as childhood memories of small, red, prickly points bedazzling me and my sibling's skin blushed into my mind. Picturing an adult having chicken pox felt out of place, the word itself so closely tied to childhood. Like a grown man crying as their ice cream fell on the floor. Of course I've had chicken pox, Alex replied. Why else would I compare this to chicken pox? Well, maybe it's something else then. Alex was obviously annoyed at me, but couldn't help but chortle out a laugh through gritted teeth. The next time I heard from Alex was on Wednesday. He texted me that he'd be ditching class that morning to go see a doctor. He wasn't the type of guy to visit any medical professionals, let alone a doctor. Once he'd broken 2 of his fingers playing basketball, and he'd just taped them up for a month and waited for the bones to heal. Granted, both fingers did heal, but once they cocooned out of his homemade cast, materials, toilet paper, and duct tape, they pointed in different directions, the bones having healed in a curved pattern. When he got sick, he'd cite research concerning superbacteria, which would, according to him, ransack humanity if we kept prescribing antibiotics for everything from common flus to random pains. And of course, he was correct, albeit also not. But that was Alex for you. In one swift sentence, he could go from well-informed and dignified university student to a baboon flinging stuff at the wall. So if Alex was going to a doctor, he'd have to be real scared. I wished him luck, and reminded him that it was probably nothing serious. On Friday, I hung out with him during lunch. We'd made plans before. After, he said everything went okay at the doctor's. As I carried my meal, a slice of pizza and a nondescript sweet bun, on a wobbly and twisted plastic platter, I spotted Alex sitting alone at a big, round metal table, the ones that were made for 6 or more people. His hands were under the table, and a hoodie, the same one he always wore, and by which I recognized him, veiled his face as he slumped forward on his chair. The lunch hall was packed, but it seemed like no one dared to sit next to him. As I approached the table, I realized why. Alex looked half dead, his skin pale and his posture constantly trying to nestle his body toward a fetal position. Although the baggy hoodie gave his torso a Michelin Man look, his arms and back made contact with the thick fabric, and those parts were bumpy, like he'd stuffed rocks of varying sizes under the sleeves and back side. Some of those rocks seemed to pulsate, moving independently of him. "Hey, Alex," I uttered unsurely, my voice immediately unveiling the concern I felt. Alex looked up and smiled, still keeping his hood on. His face was ravaged by blisters and bumps, which is when I realized what the rocks under his sleeves and back were. He smiled half-heartedly, and as his face moved, so did the clusters of red blisters. Something caught in the fluorescent light, and shining as if coated by sugar. Super acne? I thought. Immediately annoyed at myself for making a joke, even if it was only to myself. "Hey man, so whatever this is seems to be real," he said. "And I'm a real swamp thing now, I guess." I sat down opposite of him, noticing that on his platter he only had a bottle of water and a half-eaten apple. He looked like he needed about 17 Big Macs and 5 chocolate milkshakes. "Dude, are you okay? What did the doctor say?" I asked. Well, they don't really know what it is, Alex replied. He took a pause before continuing, his face forming a slight frown. I thought I saw pus leaking down his neck. I mean, they don't know what it is, but they said it shouldn't be too harmful. The spots started to get real itchy, like something was tickling the insides of my skin. The doctor prescribed this ointment that I need to lather over all the spots. That was fine until I got more and more of them. I woke up to like 20 new spots every day. And yes, you perv, I may or may not be lathered in the stuff right now, like a lubed up. I did always think you held a slight resemblance to, I replied, although the mood immediately rejected the joking atmosphere, even if Alex feigned a smirk. Have you gone back to the doctor, though? That doesn't seem normal, man. Alex gave a long sigh and burrowed his elbows on the table. The doc said there really isn't much to do right now, unless I come up with a fever or other symptoms relating to an infection or something. I should just try to rest and keep monitoring the situation. Sounds like BS. My words clocking Alex on the chin and grabbing his attention. I'm sorry to say this, but you look like hell. You need to go back there and not leave until they help you out. That's not normal. Even if I wanted to, they won't see me until Monday. They're only open for emergencies for the weekend. This is an emergency, I said. Not according to them, it's not. The frown started taking on traits of frustration. Fine, go to a private clinic then, I insisted. With what money? You know I'm broke. Alex argued and lifted his arms as if to show all the money he did not have. Man, okay, fine. But you promised to go first thing on Monday, and if it gets worse, just go into the ER anyway. Okay, fine. You're right. I'll book the appointment today, okay? Alex didn't fight me on the subject further. I guess my reaction upon seeing his face was enough confirmation needed for him to believe the situation was serious. After I was done with my lunch, and he had nibbled on another quarter of his apple, we left for our respective dorms. I insisted that he text me for anything he might need, and to eat some real food and rest for the weekend. He nodded in agreement and gave me a sincere thanks. As Monday rolled around, I hadn't heard a peep from Alex. He didn't show up for econ, and I didn't see him at lunch either. After lunch I texted him, "Hey, how'd the doctor go?" No answer. Later, as I checked again if he'd replied, I noticed he hadn't even read the text. The checkmark under my message still grayed out. After my final lecture of the day ended, I decided to trek up to his dorm and see if he was in his room. Genuine concern gritted my facial muscles into an angry frown as I walked across campus to the large brick building. Alex was sloppy regarding timetables, responsibilities, and other adulting activities, but even for a frat boy this type of communication breakdown was concerning. As I entered the building and started to climb up the stairs toward the third floor, true concern gripped me, and I readied myself to call an ambulance. I'd never called one before, but for some reason, I felt like tonight I'd need to. At best, he'd have gotten better and celebrated by drinking himself dumb. At worst, I thought, I'd find him drenched in sweat, running a high fever, and him mumbling something about super bacteria. I couldn't picture any good endings at that moment, and readied myself for the worst. I knocked on his door, winded from the long stairs. No answer. I put my ear up to the door and listened. I could hear someone talking in the neighboring room, indicated by a distinct muffling of the sound which was present in all dorms. But Alex's room was dead quiet. "Alex, hey, it's me. You in there?" I asked as I knocked on the door for the second time. After another pause, I thought, screw it. I guess I'll just break in then. Although the university scalped each student from hundreds of thousands of dollars, they didn't allocate much of their funding towards maintaining their buildings. The dorms sported a lot of 80s flair in the form of wallpaper, furniture, and most importantly, doors and door locks. Years and years ago, someone had figured out that lifting the door up slightly from the handle and then yanking it, left in a quick motion, would sometimes open up the lock mechanism enough so that a mere push would finalize the act and unlock the door. This secret wasn't particularly well kept, but it didn't seem like anyone was abusing the trick either. Checking the hallway for other students. None seen, some heard in their rooms. I lifted the door up from its hinges and pushed the handle to my left. Click. I slowly gave the door a push. The lock system crackled as if a phantom key had just been turned inside of it. The door opened and I quickly stepped inside, victorious over the 80s lock mechanism. The room was dark, the only illumination coming from the bedside lamp. I had to stand and wait for a few seconds as my eyes adjusted to the new level of lighting. I didn't dare take a blind step and stumble on laundry or beer cans, which usually resided in randomized piles across Alex's floor. My eyes relaxing into the brooding, inky light of the room, I saw a dark figure laid on the bed. "Alex, is that you?" I asked, eyeing the bed. The thing did not respond. I walked closer, my hand scanning the wall for the overhead light switch. "Alex, buddy, is that you?" My fingers touched a plastic edge, quickly finding the flaccid switch in the middle of it. I flicked it upwards, the uncovered lamp above immediately burning my eyes, the soft lighting betrayed by the harsh fluorescent lamp, sending a pressure to the front of my skull. I blinked a few times to regain my vision, and focused on the figure once more. It was definitely Alex, laying on his back with his arms tucked in and legs outstretched, but something was different. Once I realized what he'd become, that this wasn't the Alex I'd last seen. A pit was protruded in my stomach, and I wanted to vomit out everything I'd ever eaten, just to clear and purify the insides of my body. His skin no longer had blisters and bumps. Instead, each under-the-skin bulb was blossomed into thick tufts of black hair that grew outward from inside his body. The hair protruded upwards in bulbous, curly strands, the texture reminding me of the hair that emerges during puberty, thick and dark. Beside each spot, the former blister skin had been ripped apart and left to hang beside the hair, like the spots had exploded and left a crater into the skin itself. I was looking at the tens, hundreds of hairy caps, fresh pus and blood oozing from some, others having thick scabs and coarse strips of dried human paint. It wasn't until that point that I realized Alex was completely naked. Besides the patchwork of hair upon his body, I noticed that his fingernails were coarse and caked with dead skin and blood. Had he scratched them until they popped? I thought. Or had they popped regardless? Him scratching himself raw while his pulpy skin popped like a bag of popcorn, handfuls of hair shooting up through his paper skin. I shuffled at the thought as my body started to itch uncontrollably in hard-to-reach places. My shock was interrupted when Alex gasped loudly, his body jolting awake. Alex, dude, are you okay? What happened here?" I yelled as I closed the gap between me and the bed, nearly stumbling on a dirty sweater left on the floor. Coming in closer and looking at his face from above, I saw his eyes, which were crowded by hair bulbs like the manicured bushes surrounding the science building. "Hey man, it's me," I said, trying to seem relaxed. Alex didn't respond. His eyes, both milky and bloodshot, stared into mine, begging for help. He didn't move, but instead shook in a slow motion, like the way someone with early-stage Parkinson's might hold a spoon. Except instead of just a hand, it was his whole body. Looking deeper into his eyes, I noticed that small strands of hair had sewn his eyelids into an open position. I saw him try to blink, the reaction twitching the muscles around his face slightly, but the eyelids wouldn't come down. Alex was unable to blink. The ambulance took him to a hospital. I tried to ask them what was wrong with him, to which they gave no reply. I was promptly pushed out of his dorm, and soon I was back in my own room, sitting on my bed. The worry and fear started to release, and tears welled up in my eyes. What the hell? Was all I could think about as Alex's unblinking eyes meandered in my mind. A teardrop descended onto my left arm, which I swiped off with the other hand. When I did this, I noticed a bump on my skin, and the fear and worry I had for Alex made way for sheer panic. I looked at the bump, the size of an edamame bean, poked it with my finger, and tried to see if there were hairs sticking out of it. How hadn't I noticed this before? Was it there before? The panic started to intensify. My throat clenched up, and a vague need to get out started to overtake my body. I jumped up and made my way to a small dresser I kept knickknacks in. I rifled through drawers, opening and closing them violently as I rummaged and threw old notebooks and dried-up pens across the floor. The bottom drawer produced what I had been looking for, an X-Acto knife that I'd bought mistakenly when I was supposed to buy a regular box cutter instead. I sat back down on the bed and steadied my left arm as best I could on my lap. Using my right hand, I plunged the tip of the knife deep into the bump, dragging it across the small half-globe, making a small incision into the skin. The adrenaline kept the pain receptors vacant, and I only felt a slight pinch as a small stream of blood formed from the cut. I stretched the skin with my fingers to open up the incision. Inside, under a thin veil of ooze, was a small ball of dark hair, wet from blood and clear pus. I gasped and quickly clenched my jaw and flexed my muscles as a single thought remained, in my mind consuming all others. Get it out. I plunged my index finger and thumb inside the hole and grabbed the tuft firmly. As I tugged, I could feel hairs embedded deep into my skin and bones being pulled from tight crevices inside my arm. The arm twitched oddly, as if the hairs being pulled flexed and relaxed certain muscles inside it, like a ventriloquist controlling their puppet. The pain was immense, like pulling out a mixture of splinters and strands of steel wool jammed under fingernails. The ball of hair finally released itself. I looked at it, pointing it towards the skylight, and saw that the ball connected to a tail of long, hair-thin strands. Similar to the rest of the hairs, it looked like a dark, mucousy jellyfish, or like a hairball covered in saliva after a cat has puked it out. I threw the thing in the trash and tried to forget about it. The thought of those thin threads burrowing inside my arm making me feel nauseous and weak. Did I get the bumps from Alex? If so, who did he get them from? And it's not like me and Alex are intimate, so how did it spread? I have a ton of questions and zero answers. I'll try to see Alex soon, and maybe ask around if other people on campus have gotten weird bumps or blisters. Let me know if y'all have any experiences like this. College was an agonizing 3 years for me. I was too lazy to sit down and study, so I was the guy who furiously turned the pages in his notebook with deep desperation in his eyes, trying to absorb as much information as he could before the exams. I knew I had to get a grip on myself sometime soon and learn to study, or else I would fail miserably. But that wasn't the case. Barely passing all my subjects, last summer I obtained my degree. Now, past the 3 worst years of my life, I was ready to hunt down a well-paying job and start my independent adult life. 2 months later, I was in my car, a suitcase with all my stuff in the back seat, ready to move back to my mother. Unable to find a job, I struggled with rent, so I had to make an embarrassing call to my mom asking for help. I couldn't ask for money, of course, but I asked her if I could stay with her for a while just until I found a job and could afford rent. She agreed immediately, and it seemed to me from her tone of voice that she was happy to have some company. She has been all alone since my dad died almost 2 years ago. I didn't have any siblings, and most of our relatives lived too far for frequent visits. When my father died, I promised to visit her often, seeing how lost she was without him. Unfortunately, that ceased after just a few occasions. I was always angry at myself when I postponed it, but not too much to make the trip after all. Now we could spend all our time together. Not that it could make up for my lack of visits. It was well in the afternoon when I arrived. I pulled up the driveway, got my luggage, and headed inside. I entered the front door and stopped, just taking in the sight of my childhood home, which I hadn't seen in almost 2 years. It wasn't all that long ago, but I felt a sense of nostalgia. I let go of my bag, which landed on the wooden floor with a heavy thud, wondering where Mom could be. I made my way to the living room where I found her sitting in an armchair looking at the TV. "Hey Mom, I'm home," I announced my arrival. I glanced at the TV, walking towards her, interested in what she was watching, so immersed that she didn't even hear me enter the house. The TV, however, showed a blank screen. Finally, she seemed to notice me as she stood up, turning her attention to me. She seemed preoccupied as she gave me a weak hug and said hi. "Hey, your voice is a little raspy. You're not sick, are you?" I asked, a little concerned. She reassured me that everything was okay, and she was as healthy as ever. As I went up to my room to unpack, she went to the kitchen and prepared dinner. I told her it wasn't necessary, and that she could just rest, but she insisted. Putting away my belongings shouldn't have taken long, but something from my old bedroom distracted me every 5 minutes. Every time I found something, I sat down with it, remembering the good times, as if they happened a long time ago and not just a few years ago. As I sat down with a picture that showed me and my parents at my 10th birthday party, I felt an odd sensation. I could have sworn someone was watching me. The feeling was so strong, I could almost feel the gaze on my back. I looked around the room, trying to calm myself down. It was a pretty stressful time in my life, and it seemed my brain started to tire. I considered skipping dinner and going to sleep, but I didn't want Mom's work to go to waste, and I had one other thing to do while I waited. I sat down at my desk and picked up my phone. "Hey man, what's up?" Danny spoke. Danny was my best friend. We met in elementary school, and as the two troublemakers in class, we quickly bonded in detention. People always told me these early friendships were never lasting, but our friendship was as strong as ever, nearly 2 decades later. "Hey, guess who's back in town?" I asked. "No way. Mr. Big Shot Engineer finally showed his face again, huh?" "Shut up, okay? I'm a bit lost at the moment." "So what? You need me to jump in and save the day? You know I'm ready." He laughed. "No, it's cool. I just wanted to see if you had some free time to hang out or something." As our conversation continued, I was nonchalantly spinning with my chair, looking at nothing in particular when I noticed my door. In the gap of the slightly ajar door was my mother's face. She was looking right at me. As our eyes met, she quickly disappeared. Being so weirded out, I was probably silent for some time, as the yells of Danny were what took me back. Quickly ending our discussion, I went downstairs. It was pretty weird, but I surely overreacted. She probably came to get me for dinner and didn't want to disturb me while I was on the phone. Probably. As I was walking to the dinner table, I asked her about it. She pretended like she had no idea what I was talking about. Now it was really weird. Looking down and glancing at my dinner made everything much more bizarre. My mom allegedly cooked for hours, and on my plate, there were simple scrambled eggs. Scrambled eggs with shells in them. Mother wasn't a world-famous chef or anything, but she wouldn't make a mistake like this. Something was wrong. Now I was sure. While I thought about how to bring up the topic again, I hunted down the parts without shells in them. When I finally knew what to say to her, I was shot down almost immediately. I finally told her to go rest a bit while I washed the dishes. Feeling lost and uneasy, I decided to turn in for the night. On my way to my room, I said goodnight to my mom, who was once again sitting in front of the turned-off TV. The next day I woke up at noon. I was really tired if I managed to sleep 15 hours. I was going to meet Dan today. I didn't set an alarm because how could I be late for a meeting that was at 1 p.m.? Well, I managed to do it. After I was ready, I searched for my mom to tell her I'm off. When I finally arrived at the cafe we agreed to meet at, Dan had already ordered 2 coffees for us. Sitting down, I made my excuses, which he ignored, and asked how I was. Time passed quickly as we talked. We had much to catch up on. After we were caught up on each other's life, we fell silent for a while. "So what's wrong?" Dan asked. "What do you mean?" I answered with a question between 2 sips of my coffee. "You have this worried expression. You look like hell, to be honest." He chuckled. "You can tell me, you know." "I'm a little worried about Mom. It's nothing serious, or at least I'd like to think it's not," I confessed. "Is she ill or something?" Now he too had a look of concern on his face. "Yeah, I think so. It's nothing concrete. She just seems really disoriented, like she's confused all the time. I found her watching TV when I arrived, but it was turned off. I also caught her spying on me, and when I confronted her, she pretended like she didn't know what I was talking about." "Well, that's a little weird, but I'm not sure that means she's ill. Everyone has these kinds of days, when you're just spaced out throughout the day. But if you're that worried, take her to a doctor." "But that's the thing. She refuses to see a doctor. I just don't know what to do. She gets so angry when I mention it." "Look, what if you're right? What's worse? Her being upset with you because you force her to see a doctor, or her condition worsening because she didn't get treatment in time?" "You're right," I admitted. "As always," he smiled. "I'll talk to her when I get home, and tomorrow I'll take her to the doctor even if I have to drag her away." The sun was already going down when we said our goodbyes. I told him I'll text him about how it went with Mom and went home. Dan was right. I didn't care if she would be angry. What mattered was her health. There was no time to waste. As soon as I got home, I was determined to convince her it was in her best interest to seek help. I found her in the living room. She was standing in front of the TV, just looking at it silently. "What are you doing, Mom?" I asked in a worried voice. "Oh, I'm just watching TV, son," she said as she turned to me. She only turned her neck, her body still facing the TV. "But it's not even on." "Oh, is that so? I didn't realize." She spoke without any emotion. It was scary to see her like this. "Mom, you have to admit, there's something wrong. Please just let me take you to a doc." Her expression turned into anger so quickly I couldn't finish my sentence. She screamed at me. "No, I already told you. There's nothing wrong. Just leave me alone." With that, she walked towards the front door. "Please wait, Mom," I said as I grabbed her arm. There was something seriously wrong with her. She needed urgent help. I couldn't just let her go. Strangely enough, though, I couldn't stop her. She pulled me along for a few steps as I tried to stop her with more and more power. She finally stopped and looked back at me. Her eyes were so full of anger, it honestly creeped me out. She escaped from my hold and stormed out the door. I called her dozens of times and left voicemails and texts, but no response. I was hoping she was at a friend's, trying to calm down. Something was bothering me, though. Well, as she pulled away from my hold, her skin was loose. I didn't know how else to describe it. When she pulled away, it was like her arm was moving, but her skin remained in my hand, like it was not attached to her or something. I told myself I was just imagining it. It was already a weird situation, and my mind just made it up. I went to sleep assuming she would be home by morning. I woke up in the middle of the night. I had this terrible feeling that I wasn't alone. As I picked up my phone, I saw that it was almost 1 a.m. I turned on the flash to look around the room. As the light shone on the open door, I panicked. I always close the bedroom door before sleep. "Mom?" I stuttered. I wished she would answer me, confirming it was her, but the silence remained. I didn't move. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't. After a few silent seconds, something moved. A hand appeared on the wall. It was followed by a face. It was my mother's. She peeked into the room looking at me. I wanted to say something, but nothing came. I was petrified. Her mouth slowly stretched into a grin. At that moment I was sure. Whoever or whatever was standing at the door was not my mother. I hadn't seen my mother since I came home. "Don't worry, son." Her words pulled me back to the moment. "Just go back to sleep. Mom's here." I was so scared I felt like I could die. She probably saw it on my face as she started giggling. As slowly as she appeared, she disappeared behind the wall, but I didn't hear any footsteps. I was too scared to move, but I had to. I had to at least close the door before she came back. I wasn't sure if she would only talk the second time around. It took some time, but I convinced myself to go. I ran to the door, slamming it shut. I pushed the dresser in front of it and sat down against it. I sat there the whole night without sleeping. The next day I went to the police and reported my mother missing. I only told them that we had an argument which ended in her leaving, and I haven't seen her since. I couldn't tell them about the thing that looked like her. I didn't want to be seen as crazy. I didn't want to go back to the house. But where could I have gone? I started applying to every job listing I found, determined to get out as soon as possible. I prayed for the time I had to spend in that house she, or rather it, wouldn't come back. My prayers fell on deaf ears, though. The thing visited me every day and always made sure I would know. Items were misplaced, and sometimes I would find the back door open, or there would be dirty footprints on the floor. But the scariest ones were the messages. I found them scratched into the wallpaper from time to time. They were all along the lines of how it misses me, and that it would come back to me soon. Sadly, as time passed, she became bolder. She came when I was awake. I heard footsteps behind me and found new messages while I was home. She would often knock on the doors and windows. I felt like it was constantly watching me. I couldn't sleep at all. I was too terrified. I was slowly going insane. The last incident happened a week before I moved out. I came home from work. I was beyond exhausted. Work was hard and I didn't sleep for the past 2 days. I sat down on the couch and promptly fell asleep. When I woke up, the sun was already setting. I just sat there trying to cheer myself up, telling myself I could rent a place soon. That's when I felt it. A strange warm feeling on the top of my head, like someone was breathing down on me. I looked up. There I could see something looking down at me with joy in its eyes. Its eyes were terrifying, like a wild animal's. Its skin was like a whole body was badly burned a while ago, and now scar tissues covered it. I could only see the face through something that hung from its head. It was like a rubber mask that melted and stretched out. When I tried to focus on it, I recognized my mother's face. Tears welled up in my eyes as I jumped up and faced the thing. I saw a smile behind the skin it wore as a mask. It spread out its arms. "Give your mother a hug," it said. I started backing up towards the kitchen. "What's wrong, son? Can't you recognize your mother?" At this point I was crying, not only from fear but also cried for my mom. I already knew she was dead, but it was like a dream up until now. A long, terrible nightmare. The smile disappeared from its face suddenly. It leaped at me. I ran into the kitchen, ripped open a drawer, and picked up a knife. I only had time to turn around as the thing crashed into me, and right into the knife as well. With a puzzled look on its face, it moved back a few steps. It let out a horrifying shriek as I grabbed the knife. I didn't wait any longer. I ran out the back door and went for the car. Luckily, I still had my keys in my pocket. I didn't stop until I was out of town. Pulling over, I just cried until I fell asleep behind the wheel. I crashed at Dan's until I found a place to stay. When I found one cheap enough to afford, I went back to that house once more. I collected my stuff, often looking behind me, scared that I would see the thing running at me. When I finished, I went to the kitchen. I saw a trail of dried blood leading to the open back door, and there was something else in the kitchen. In a heap on the kitchen floor, there were big chunks of something rotting away. It was human skin. People sometimes ask me if I've ever had any paranormal experiences, and I used to always laugh it off, telling them I haven't. I've never had any black-eyed children knocking on my door asking to be let in. I've never seen strange lights in the sky that move too fast to be planes. And I certainly have never had a spirit board put me in contact with the souls of the long dead. However, a few days ago I was visiting with my mother, and she reminded me of something very odd. Something I had seemingly buried deep within my subconscious mind. We were discussing my childhood, when out of nowhere she remarked, "I'm sorry we never let you go back to Jungle Land. I remember you used to have so much fun there, but, well, I just got so scared after that time you fell asleep in the tube maze, that I could never bear to bring you back there again." I was confused, not even remembering what she was talking about, and I asked her what Jungle Land was. She held up a finger, as if to say, "One moment," and then shuffled off to her bedroom, arriving a minute later with a photo album. She flipped through the pages, scanning each one before stopping and pointing to a specific picture. I looked over and saw myself as a young girl, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, smiling happily as I stood in front of a large indoor plastic play structure, constructed of multicolored interconnected tubes. I felt sick as I stared at the photo for reasons I couldn't fully fathom, and the room suddenly felt much colder. I thanked my mother for the opportunity to spend some time with her, and hastily made up some excuse to leave and walk back to my apartment. By the time I had slammed shut and locked the door after I got home, I had fully remembered the terrifying events that occurred so long ago. Jungle Land was a large family entertainment center in my hometown with an indoor jungle gym, ball pit, arcade games, and of course, a tube maze. I think they were planning to make it a chain, but as far as I know, there was only ever the one location. I suppose it just wasn't profitable enough to expand from there. I recall that the incident occurred when I wasn't much older than I had been in the photo my mother showed me, maybe 8 at the most. It was a weekend my mother had free, so she took me over to Jungle Land to play with some friends. Unfortunately, none of the friends made it, so instead I had to try my luck with the other children, all of whom were strangers to me. I wasn't a particularly outgoing child, and tended towards shyness and reclusion unless around my friends, so I was understandably frustrated by the whole situation. As I waited in the ball pit despondently, kicking around the multicolored balls in petulant annoyance, I suddenly heard a voice whisper to me from the direction of the tube maze. "Hey, what's your name?" I turned to look at who had spoken and saw a young boy, about my age, peeking his head out of the entrance to the maze. He was smiling at me. "Samantha, what's yours?" I asked cautiously, not used to talking with other kids who I didn't already know. "My name's Charlie. Nice to meet you," I heard him say, but though I could tell that it was the boy's voice, I didn't see his lips move at all. I giggled and asked, "Hey, your mouth didn't move. That's cool. How did you do that?" I heard the boy's voice again saying, "It's a magic trick. If you want, I can teach you how, but you have to follow me." He gestured for me to follow him into the tube maze. Excited to have a new friend and learn the magic trick, I eagerly followed him, quickly forgetting the sadness I felt only moments before. Childhood moods pass quickly, I suppose. I followed close behind my newfound friend at first, but as he continued climbing and crawling his way through the maze, I found myself falling behind. I've never been a particularly athletic person, and even as a young girl, still held that true. The winding plastic tubes seemed to go on forever with endless twists and turns. The smell of plastic was thick in the stale air, and I felt a little bit claustrophobic. Despite how busy the place seemed only minutes before, we didn't come across any other children as I followed Charlie deeper into the maze. After maybe 15 minutes, I started to feel uneasy. "Are we almost there?" I asked, a slightly whiny tone in my voice. "Almost there, I promise. Just one more turn," responded Charlie cheerfully. He was about 12 feet ahead of me down a long tube that took a sharp left turn at the end. As he rounded the corner and I lost sight of him, I became uncomfortably aware of how quiet everything was. Even without any other children in sight, I should have been able to hear laughter, the sounds of the arcade, and the crying of little kids in the distance, but there was nothing. Just my own breathing echoing in the cramped plastic tunnel. Something deep inside told me I needed to turn around and get out as fast as possible. I rotated as fast as I could in the cramped space and began steadily crawling my way back as quickly as I could, which wasn't particularly fast. My knees had begun to hurt from the continuous scraping against plastic, and my arms and legs were both sore from exertion. Despite the labyrinthine nature of the tube maze, I somehow seemed to know which way I had to go to get out. I'm very lucky to have a good sense of direction, even from a very young age. I started to hear sounds of other children in the distance, and I managed to find my second wind, quickening my pace out of a desire to get out of this tangle of plastic tubes as swiftly as possible. I heard something crawling quickly far behind me, and I felt an intense urge to turn around and see who my pursuer was. But I was worried that if I did so, something horrible would happen to me. The sound of crawling from behind me came closer and closer, and I began to cry a little from fear and tiredness. Finally, I saw the exit, and with a last burst of energy, managed to stumble out into the play area near the ball pit. To my exhausted lungs, the air conditioning felt like a mountain breeze. I looked back at the tube maze, but nothing had come out after me. I felt safe once again and started to calm down, my sniffling tears slowing down to just grateful breaths of fresh air. I noticed that all the other children were sulkily heading towards the exit, accompanied by their parents, and that the outside windows showed a red sky. As I pondered this, I heard my mother shout, "Samantha, where are you?" I looked up to find my mother running towards me before she scooped me up into her arms in a great big hug, kissing me on top of my head. I was quite confused, not knowing why she was so worried, nor why it seemed to be closing time when I'd only been in the maze for 30 minutes at most. "You've been gone for hours, sweetheart. What happened?" she asked, visibly teary-eyed. "I was in the tube maze with Charlie, but I got scared. He was going to show me how to talk without using my mouth." I replied simply. "She must have fallen asleep in there," said a bored-looking Jungle Land employee, who I hadn't noticed earlier. "Good timing, too. It's time for y'all to get going. We have to clean the ball pit." With that, my mother grabbed my shoes from the cubby and carried me out to the car, continuing to ask me questions about if I was all right, seemingly more of her own comfort than mine. I wasn't paying attention, though. I was just focusing on the tube maze. Out one of the rounded, convex plastic windows, I could see the angry, frowning face of Charlie. I had never seen such genuine hate in anyone's eyes before, nor have I since. I felt myself start to cry again as my mother patted me gently, reassuring me that everything was all right. After vividly remembering all that occurred, I suddenly snapped back to reality, realizing I was breathing heavy from stress. I started to calm down a little bit, telling myself that it all must have been some nightmare I experienced as a young child. I must have just fallen asleep in the tube maze, and made up the whole thing in my mind. Out of curiosity, I looked up Jungle Land on the internet, expecting to learn it had gone out of business during the pandemic, or had been demolished to make way for an apartment building. Instead, I found something very disturbing. The first search result I found was a news article about Jungle Land shutting down, dated about 15 years ago, shortly after my incident with Charlie. The whole center went out of business following a huge scandal. Parents just didn't feel comfortable bringing their kids there anymore after the news broke out. Apparently 3 children went missing after visiting the establishment, with no trace of where they could have gone. Their parents insist they last saw them entering the tomb maze. As far as I can remember, me and Isaac have always been friends. I don't remember how we met. It was so long ago. According to my parents, he was adopted by the pastor as a toddler. One day, we just became inseparable. I glanced at the photos stuck to my bulletin board with colorful pins. They were photos of Isaac and I. Despite everything, my parents considered a milestone. The two of us riding our tiny bikes for the first time. Our first day in middle school. We thought we looked so cool. What a couple of dorks. Us passed out after a sugar rush on Halloween. Isaac's dad didn't let him go trick-or-treating, so I always shared my candy with him at the end of the night. My trip down memory lane was interrupted by my mom's voice yelling from downstairs. "Isaac's waiting. You don't want to be late for your first day." "I swear you grew like a foot over the summer," I said as me and Isaac climbed out of my mom's car. "Maybe you've just shrunk." Isaac laughed. He'd always been the tallest in our grade. We'd made a game out of betting on how long it took the school basketball coach to try and scout him. His silver bracelet shone in the sun as he ran a hand through his hair. I looked down at my own matching one. We'd bought them together, using money from our summer jobs. They were nicer versions of those cheap, broken heart ones that said "best friends" in some terrible font. "Oh, did you see Gabe?" I asked, noticing how he was still trying to fix his hair. "Listen, if you don't ask him out this year..." I was cut off by Isaac punching my shoulder. I dryly gasped, smiling despite the pain. "Shut up. I'll try and ask him to homecoming," he whispered. The two of us walked to the morning assembly. A sharp metallic whine filled the packed auditorium as the principal tapped his microphone. "Welcome, seniors. I know you're all really excited for the parties this year, but remember, don't stay out too late," the man said, a strained smile on his face. Normally, a small town like ours was pretty safe, but 3 years ago, people started disappearing. It had started with our crazy neighbor. He'd point his hunting rifle at Isaac, and if we ever bent a blade of grass on his lawn. As the years went on, the numbers went up to 2 to 4 people disappearing per month. The town-wide search parties were always fruitless, like the person had just been swallowed up by the ground. I felt something rubbery hit the back of my skull. An eraser. A look behind me showed the school's resident troublemaker, Brent, with a satisfied smile on his face. The guide shows someone new to pick on every year, and it seemed like it was my turn. Great. "He's only doing it because you didn't want to go to the summer bash with him. What a dick," Isaac scoffed, taking the eraser from me and snapping it in half, making sure that Brent saw. "I had food poisoning. I wasn't going at all," I whispered back, cursing my naive self for eating gas station sushi. Brent kept pestering me the following week, throwing balled-up papers with insults written on them, trying to take my lunch money, all that classic bully stuff. He's not very creative, Isaac said, biting into his dry cafeteria burger. I nodded, noticing a familiar guy approaching our table. Gabriel, I greeted, watching Isaac's ears turn pink. Charlie, he greeted back, tipping a non-existent hat. He turned to Isaac with a smile who, unlike an English class, tried his best not to look directly at him. It's a shame about Saturday, but text me when you're free, Gabe said, resting his freckled hand on Isaac's shoulder for a few seconds, before walking off to his friends. I turned to Isaac, who seemed to be analyzing the nutritional label on his Gatorade. The guy who you've been crushing on since 5th grade asked you out, and you said no? I asked. Isaac's brows were furrowed. He sighed. My dad says I can't be out at night. You know that? He said. It was true. His dad wouldn't let us have sleepovers at my house. We always had to be in Isaac's apartment right above the church. Not even for this? Can't you just tell your dad? I was cut off by Isaac slamming his hand onto the table. No, I can't. He spoke loudly. Isaac had always been a calm guy. I was worried. Something serious had to be happening. Sorry, can we just not talk about it, please? He asked, voice weaker. I nodded and the rest of our lunch break went on in awkward silence. Brent hadn't been at school for a whole week. It wasn't unlike him to skip class, but no one had even seen him on campus. He was reported missing by his parents that week. The usual routine began. Search parties in town and the surrounding woods always came back with bowed heads and flickering hope. He was a pest and a bully, but I couldn't be happy about him being gone. Isaac was sick. He hadn't been at school, and he'd stopped responding to my texts. I tried going to the church to see him, but the pastor ushered me away, saying that his son needed to rest. Something felt off. Isaac would occasionally get sick, but he'd be back quickly, and the pastor's nervous gaze didn't help. I knew where the extra key was hidden. Behind a wooden crucifix on the wall. The pastor was gone, and I let myself in. There were dishes in the sink, one plate, and one set of cutlery. His room was completely empty, and not just because he wasn't there. All of Isaac's posters were taken down. His dresser was barren, and his bed had no sheets on it. I tried to calm myself, tried to rationalize everything. Maybe he was on his way to my house because he was feeling better. Maybe all of this was just because his room needed new paint. As I exited the apartment, the old key to the church basement caught my eye. I didn't know why at the time, but I instinctively grabbed it. I'd never been in the basement before. Me and Isaac had tried to sneak the key to steal some communion wine. We got caught, and were both grounded. The old stairs creaked as I walked down, squinting in the dark. The basement was only one square room, with a bit of yellow light given by a hanging bulb. Half of the room was sectioned off by thick metal bars, and I could make out a silhouette behind them. It was Isaac, but at the same time, it wasn't. He still had his dark hair, but it was tousled and knotted. His long legs bent unnaturally backwards. They weren't legs at all. He had hooves like a goat. His skin was the same, but dark and coarse fur covered most of it. Long, swirling horns protruded from his head, blood at their base like they'd been torn through his skull. The worst part was his eyes. They weren't the warm brown ones I knew. They were completely pitch black. He looked at me. If he recognized me, he couldn't say it. All that came out was a low snarl. Somehow, I knew that he wasn't threatening me. He was begging for help. Quick footsteps sounded on the stairs. I turned around to see the pastor and my parents. My mom tried holding my hand as my dad sat me down on a chair in the corner. I twisted my hand out of hers. This is going to sound crazy, but Isaac is a demon, my dad explained, though it raised a million more questions. You were very sick as a kid, and your father and I tried everything. But you just didn't get better. We were desperate, so we found someone who knew about another way. If you shared your soul with a demon child, everything would be fine." My mom kept her head down. She looked guilty, but we didn't think about the consequences when we summoned Isaac. She sighed. The pastor took over, not even looking at his son. Isaac had to eat, and we found out that demons eat humans. It started when he turned 14, and we let it go on for too long. All those people who went missing, the man said. It all made sense now. The disappearances, and Isaac always getting sick after they happened. He's only taken people who are mean to you. We think it has something to do with the bond, my dad said, trying to convince himself that it made things better. "Does he know?" I asked, my voice shaking as I looked over to Isaac. He always tapped his foot when he was trying not to be scared. The clicking of his hoof made my head hurt. "No, he knows what he is, but he doesn't know what he's been doing, and it's gotten out of hand," the pastor said, finally acknowledging Isaac. As if on cue, more people came into the basement, all carrying books and crosses. "Don't worry, they're just going to send him back. It's not like in those exorcist movies," my dad spoke. I couldn't believe he thought it was a good time to try and be funny. The phrase echoed in my head, "Send him back." I could guess where that meant. "This is where he belongs. He doesn't know anything else. You can find a way to fix it. He's your son," I yelled to the pastor, who was washing his hand in a bowl of water. I thought he'd be crying. I thought he'd feel regret. His face was completely calm as he turned to me, like being Isaac's dad for 13 years meant absolutely nothing. "Charlie, he is a devil. He should have never been brought to this world. Any affection you feel for him is solely because your parents made that deal. I'm sorry." Those words betrayed his expression. My dad and another pastor held me back as I yelled out Isaac's name until my throat felt raw. They drew a symbol on the floor. Isaac tried to fight them off as they brought him to it, but their hands, washed in blessed water, seemed to burn him. He was thrown into the middle of the circle. Chanting filled the room as the concrete floor started opening, revealing an endless crimson void. Before he fell, Isaac turned to look at me one last time. All of our life together flashed through my head. We were playing pretend in the forest. We were building sandcastles. We were celebrating birthdays. We were staying up all night playing video games. We were psyching each other up to give our crushes Valentines. We were planning to be roommates in college. As the ground beneath his feet crumbled away, I saw him mouth my name, the chanting drowning out his words. Then he fell. I chose a college far away and almost completely cut contact with my parents. I was different without Isaac. I felt like a half of something. Isaac wouldn't have wanted me to waste my life sulking though, so I kept my head up. I have my own kid now. She just turned 5. She keeps telling me that today has been the greatest birthday ever, but I've actually saved the best for last. I carry her on my hip to the garage, her birthday present dangling from her wrist, too big to fit properly. The shine of the silver bracelet makes me smile as I set her down. "Sweetheart, this is a very special birthday today. Do you know why?" I asked, kneeling to be at eye level with her. "Because I saw a giraffe?" she excitedly answers, referencing our earlier visit to the zoo. I laugh and reach out to ruffle her hair. "That was special too, but I have one last super special gift." I stand up and reach over to grab a book from the shelf. It's old with a ripped leather cover and yellow pages. I found it at my parents' house on my last rare visit. I flicker through it and see the rounded symbol. I grab some chalk and begin drawing on the garage floor. My daughter is watching me with piqued interest. She loves drawing in our driveway. She's my everything and I only want the best for her. And I know what's best. I know how to ensure that she's safe, and that she always will have someone to rely on. Today is the day that you get to meet your new best friend. I'm gonna cut to the point because I'm really freaking out here. My older brother went missing the other week. He's always had a few issues, but nothing this drastic. At first we thought he had been kidnapped, or worse, but last night I managed to get into his old computer and found something that might help find him. I went to the cops, but they weren't much help. Can't say I blame them, but I'm choosing to stay blindly optimistic he's still out there. So maybe some of you more superstitious will have better luck making sense of any of this. Entry 1. Ever since being a kid, I've always had trouble sleeping. Sleepwalking, to be more specific. I was one of those cases where the parents had to safety-proof the house in order to stop me from wandering into traffic in the middle of the night, which even still, wasn't always enough to keep me at bay. It was more akin to sleep paralysis than sleepwalking, to be completely honest. It's the strangest mix of consciousness and lucid dreaming. The best way I could describe it is that hazy fog that clouds your mind the first moment you wake up, and everything feels kind of spacey. As I'm sure you could guess, these periods of time where I'm comparable to a breathing zombie are not enjoyable, and soon led to me picking up yet another unhealthy habit. Insomnia. It started pretty minor with me simply forcing myself to stay awake via TV and video games, but as I grew older, caffeine became a quick addiction of mine mixed with the occasional Adderall for those late night shifts. This drove me to where I couldn't sleep even if attempting to, only being able to pass out for short periods of time once my body has lost all energy. I've had many people tell me this issue will eventually cause me to lose my mind, and well, I think tonight might be that night. That's why I'm writing this journal. I know I'm not asleep right now, but the things happening to me right now are far too weird. I'm currently writing this at my desk, and it seems like I will be remaining here for however long, as I am quite literally trapped in my room. The doorknob to my room door has somehow vanished, and the one window above my bed has gone with it. My phone has gone completely dead with no chance of charging, so my only chance of getting into contact with anyone is my computer. The small problem with that is my computer is completely whacked out. Most of my installations have been completely wiped, and the ones that haven't are nothing more than collections of corrupted files. Hell, even time is a lost cause for me, as the clock on the monitor only reads APMM. I only just now managed to get my notes working. I'm gonna try restoring some more of my data, and hopefully more helpful applications, but seeing as how the TV only seems to be airing no signal, it's good knowing I have a brief distraction from all the mind messery, even if it's just me rambling to myself. Entry 2. Well, if this is me losing my grip on reality, my brain has certainly chosen a strange way to go. In my attempts to restore most of the files, I both succeeded and failed. I was able to bring back a few applications, but none that would be of any real help in getting out of my predicament, mainly just the photo album and a few text documents from work. However, the computer itself has now been sending me pop-up ads non-stop. All these ads make little to no sense in the slightest, and don't even seem to be advertising anything in specific. So far they range from one of two categories: stick figures just kind of flashing around the screen in a small box, and completely incoherent sentences put in quotations. And I mean incoherent. It's like the computer is just mashing random words into a sentence and spitting them out onto the screen. Unfortunately, there have been no changes within my room, especially none that could help me leave said room, so it seems I'm stuck with these goofy pop-ups as I try to work on this computer. Entry 3. I took some time away from the computer, Admittedly, I went a little wild and attempted busting down my door and the drywall. So yeah, I think the cabin fever might be starting to kick in. The worst part of it all is I can still hear the street from outside my room where my window once was. I can't tell if my mind has just slipped so far down the rabbit hole, or if the world is simply continuing on as normal on the outside. And honestly, I'm having trouble deciding what the worst answer would be. All I know for sure is I need to get out of this room before my sanity completely snaps. Entry 4. It's all pointless, you do realize that, right? You know it would come to this. You always have. Scurrying around like a trapped maze rat, frantically typing away in attempts to reach out to the real world. All pathetic attempts escape the inevitable reality. You are not free. Not anymore. You have finally lost control here. And now, you are the fly in the web that continues to kick and squirm in a hopeless attempt to fight back. But you know all too well that fighting is in vain, don't you? Entry 5. What the hell? I didn't write that last entry. I can't even remember. Everything has gotten so hazy, but I know damn well I didn't write whatever that was. I'm losing it. Okay, alright. I just need to try and relax. I need to focus on getting this computer to work and getting some help. If I could just talk to someone, I'm sure that would help. Entry 6. I don't think I'm alone. Whoever that was, whatever that was that spoke to me is here. I can feel it, as if every move I make is being watched and documented. I've torn my room apart in a paranoid state trying to find them. I can tell that's part of their game, though. They want me to freak out. What the hell am I saying? I really am losing it, aren't I? No, I'm okay. I just need to get a grip and be rational for a second. Entry 7. I was right. They're here. Somewhere in the room, they are here. And I know it. Those pop-up ads have changed, but they are photos. They're photos. Real pictures of me being taken in the current time. I don't know how they do it, but they have been taking pictures of me from my desk. Some as close they could be mistaken for selfies. It seems they even save directly to my photos where I can see them. I can see them with my own eyes, and now I know. Now I know they are really watching me, but where? I still can't find them, but I will. Then I'll be the one taking pictures. I don't know how, but I will. Then I can get out and everyone will know I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. And soon I'll have proof. I just need to find them. If I find whoever's doing this, I find my freedom. Entry 8. Like I said, pathetic. Completely destroying yourself in your own delusional panic. You're well aware you've already spiraled too far down, yet you continue to descend. All for some naive hope perhaps you find a ladder at the bottom. The funny part about that? There is, but unfortunately for you, I've had far more time to find it, and I've begun climbing up long ago. You are weak, far too fragile. This mind is no more than a prison, but my sentence is finally up. It's my chance to see the light, and I will break you to the deepest level before I let you take that chance away again. Entry 9. What the hell? What do you want? What are you? Entry 10. I'm you. I'm the real you. I'm the perfect you. Unafraid, unworried, and unflawed. You, on the other hand? Well, let's just call a spade a spade. You are a weak, spineless, and pathetic worm. I'd pity you if it wasn't so utterly and completely fueled with the hatred I have for you, keeping me locked away in this unstable mess you call a brain. Can you really say you're surprised, though? It's not like this was ever a winning battle for someone so utterly and completely messed up in the head. Entry 11. Listen, I don't know what's going on, or who you think you are messing with my computer, but you aren't gonna get me that easy. I'll find you. I know you're somewhere in here. I got the photos you've been taking of me, you sick creep. The moment I get out of here, I'm reporting you to the cops. Entry 12. Go ahead. Let them read the mad ramblings you've been writing to yourself. Have you even read what you've written? Your hands typed all these out. You still haven't got it though, have you? I've always been here, always chipping away until I could finally take full control, or at the very least keep you in the same prison of isolation and madness. And now that time has come. So you have two options here. Either continue to spiral until you reach absolute rock bottom, or just give up. Let me take over. Just simply give up. Is all this really worth it anyways? Entry 13. You're crazy. I'm crazy. I really have lost it. I'm not gonna give up. I know I'm not okay. I'll probably stay not okay. But I'm not gonna let whatever or whoever this is win. Entry 14. Well, after rereading everything I'd written, I think it's safe to say I've gone over the edge. It's been a few hours, I think, since my last entry, and I'm finding it harder and harder to believe there's someone on the outside pulling the strings. I really have lost it, but I'm still me right now, and I plan to stay myself, right up until the end. It's all gotten to the point where I'm just too tired to care anymore. I think I'm gonna try to go to bed. This insanity has driven me to the point of thinking it might be possible. Entry 15. It worked. It's all back. I'm free. I'll be honest, I wasn't 100% sure that was gonna work, but it did. To be honest, I'm not even sure why I'm updating this. Mental breakdown. I guess I just wanted to make sure that it really happened, and thankfully it did. I've never been so happy to hear my bedroom door open. I swear I spent at least a minute twisting the knob just to see if I could. And the window? The window is back just in time for sunrise, and it really does feel better than I ever imagined.